Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I'll be live streaming some of my all-time favorite video games right here on Friday, August 31st from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific Time, so I hope you'll join me for that. We've got a ton going on here at Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central, including our in-depth Bible study for geeks, movie, game, and other entertainment reviews or commentary, live streams, Christian geek news, original audio dramas, and tons more. And on top of all that, you can become a Spirit Blade Insider with an influential voice and get access to exclusive content and rewards. It's your involvement as a patron that will keep all of this going and growing, so I want to thank you for your consideration in that. For more information, please check out our Patreon page through the link below at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Thanks for listening.
Christians are doing all kinds of things on the internet these days. Some things are cool, some things are strange. I'd like to tell you about what I found Christians doing on this internet. Welcome to the Christian Chapter.
Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions, here with your Christian Geek News Radar. Covering the months of July and August, there were a few interesting things that came about. First, though, in local news, I wanted to let you guys know that Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central have launched a Patreon where you can get some goodies for supporting us at a number of different tier levels, starting as low as $1. You can get more information about that over at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. This coming Friday, I'm going to be hosting a live stream featuring some of my all-time favorite video games. This will be the second year in a row I've done it. Some new games have been added to that list since last year, actually 2, which I didn't imagine I'd be adding more than 1 per year at most to this list, but 2 games I can officially say have become my all-time, part of my all-time favorites list. So anyway, that's going to be on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ChristianGeekCentral this Friday, August 31st, starting at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So I hope you'll tune in and enjoy that. Now branching out a little bit to the Christian Geek Central network, the Theology Gaming podcast is one of the shows on that network. It's a great conversational podcast about video games and some of the issues of faith that can either come about playing video games or actually in the games themselves. And it's a great show. They took a hiatus for about a year and have still in that time had a really active Facebook group that I've been known to pop over and join in conversation in myself. So they've got great stuff going on there, but they recently announced that they are rebooting the podcast, getting things back into gear again. And so I wanted to be sure and highlight that so that you guys knew that a new episode of the Theology Gaming Podcast went up on August 3rd, 2018, where they talk about why they were gone and what the renewed focus of the Facebook group is going to be, and and their plans a bit for going forward. So you can get more info on that at theologygaming.com, and of course all the members of the Christian Geek Central network you can get more information about at christiangeekcentral.com. All right, moving on now. Comic book author J.S. Earls has an Indiegogo campaign going right now for about 12 days left for a book called The Cry, which is an anti-child abuse horror comic. The subtitle description for it on Indiegogo is a hauntingly written, beautifully illustrated comic book thriller. J.S. Earls really puts out quality stuff. I interviewed him years ago. Well, first let's go down here, and he's really teamed up with a great artist, got some real cool, it looks like a very dark, the sample art on the Indiegogo page looks like a very dark kind of color palette, very serious subject matter, and it just looks like it's really being done with excellence. So if you want to check that out, before I forget, you can go to Indiegogo.com, and in the search field, just enter The Cry Horror Comic. The Cry Horror Comic, and it'll come up right there in the search results, and you can check it out for yourself. On the bottom of the Indiegogo page, they mentioned that, let's see, where is this? For every $2 that are raised by the Indiegogo campaign, $1 will fund the comic's production and printing, and $1 will be donated to protect.org. So anyway, for more information, go to Indiegogo.com and search for The Cry horror comic. If you want to hear more from J.S. Earls, learn a little bit more about him as a writer, in the archives of this podcast, number 46 of what was at that time called the Spirit Blade Underground podcast, that's part one of my interview with J.S. Earls, talking about his, at that time, upcoming series Pistol Fist, which is a really cool book, really well done also. So that's a two-part interview starting in episode 46. If you don't see the Christian Geek Central archives in like iTunes going all the way back that far, I'm not sure what iTunes is going to do with those older archives when they have a different title for the podcast. But you can always go over and find episodes 0 through 500 of the Christian Geek Central podcast at spiritblade.com. And again, that J.S. Earls interview, part 1, is episode 46 over at spiritblade.com. Let's see here, moving along. If you're interested in authors in general who write Christian geek fiction, then you might have heard of Realm Makers. This is an organization that has been known historically for really helping Christian authors kind of get their books out there, get connected to publishers and things like that, but it's really had a Christian branded focus. And recently I heard through the grapevine that they were kind of shifting their focus to explore a little bit more being about the general market as well as Christian authors. And so I wasn't sure. I reached out to them to kind of get an official statement on what their plans were, because I had also, along with that news, heard that Brent Weeks is going to be the keynote speaker for the Realm Makers Conference in 2019. For those not familiar, Brent Weeks is a New York Times best-selling fantasy author who wrote the Night Angel trilogy and is currently my favorite fantasy author of all time. I had an interview with him that I really enjoyed. You can find that on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/christiangeekcentral. Just type in Brent Weeks and it'll pop up. And it was really insightful to get some perspective on where he was coming from as a believer. It was actually in that interview that he kind of revealed, in the context of his public career, his faith in Christ. He hadn't done that before. And so him opening up about that, talking about some of those dark moments where he was like, what am I going to do with this book? I've got all these dark themes and I've got characters dropping F-bombs all over the place. It's not going to work with a Christian publisher, but yet, he has these rich biblical themes on almost every page. And so, as I was reading it, I was wondering, wow, how did a mainstream publisher, how were they just fine with this? I was a little bit surprised. And so anyway, that's a fascinating conversation that I was able to have with him, and I think he'll make a wonderful keynote speaker for Realm Makers. And I think it's also possibly an indication of kind of maybe where they're going and what kinds of things they would like to help authors accomplish. I reached out to them, and Rebecca Miner got back to me with an official statement about the direction of Realm Makers going forward. She says, and Rebecca Miner is the executive director of Realm Makers, by the way. She wrote, in terms of Realm Makers' direction, it has become increasingly clear to us over the past several years that if all the great stories of our community, our community is writing are going to find publication homes, we will need to forge paths in both Christian publishing and the general market, as well as equip independent publishers. To that end, we have been working to build inroads to the general market, as well as expand our reach within the CBA. We hope to establish ourselves as a bridge to whatever publishing landscape works best for our authors, who remain primarily Christians who write speculative fiction. We were excited to have Rowena Kuo of Tor Books with us this past year, which helped us toward our goal. Several of the agents who have attended Realm Makers over the past couple years also have track records of selling into both markets. We will continue to develop relationships with publishing professionals across the markets as we interact with them at book selling and conference events. We're looking forward to helping our authors discover their publishing paths and facilitate those journeys. So I thought that was really interesting news, and I'm encouraged by it. I think that there can be a couple of different responses we can have when we hear that something that's known to be branded as Christian starts starts to go mainstream, there can be maybe among some people a tendency to say, oh, well, they're selling out, or they're, watering down their faith. They're not really serious about their faith anymore and stuff like that. And I really don't think that's what's going on here. I think that that there's absolutely worth in creating content specifically for a Christian market. Obviously, I believe that. I've got this entity called Christian Geek Central. The audio dramas I produce over at spiritblade.com are primarily directed at a Christian audience, even though a number of people have told me they have appeal for non-Christians as well. So I absolutely think that it's valuable to have authors and creative types that are focusing on that. I also think it's really important that Christians be engaged in mainstream creative culture, doing things there, and in perhaps more subtle ways, but still uncompromising ways, bringing their faith, their beliefs into what they create, and allowing that to have some degree, in either a subtle or more open ways, have some degree of influence on the people who are reading it, who perhaps wouldn't, be offended by it, and, if the creators are careful, they're avoiding being preachy, they can say something of worth that will be received by someone reading a mainstream book or watching a mainstream movie or whatever it is, who would otherwise, not engage in something that specifically has the brand of Christian on it. So I think that this is this could be a really wonderful thing and bring about all kinds of possibilities. So I'll be excited to keep my eyes on Realm Makers going into the future, and especially next year. There's some folks at Realm Makers and some that go to Realm Makers that have for a couple of years have said, Pater, when are you going to come to one of these conferences? It'd be great to have you there and stuff. And I don't think I can justify it in my budget, but there may be a way I could justify it next year. I know someone who is potentially entering into that space of being a Christian, writing fantastical fiction for the mainstream market. And since Realm Makers is going in this direction, maybe I'll have a conversation with them and we can, I don't know, split the gas money. I don't know. We'll see. If I didn't have as much motive before, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Brent Weeks, so that's a little extra motive for me to go check out the Realm Makers conference in 2019. All right, moving on, two more items. I got an email not long ago, I want to say maybe it was end of July or early August, letting me know about some fundraising that's being done for the Pilgrims Progress animated movie. And this was actually the first that I'd heard about this. This is going to be heading into theaters, if all goes well, in the, let's see, I think they said next summer. I'm not sure when let's see here. They're looking to be finished in the summer of 2018, and presumably it's a finished product now. The email that I got was talking about them working on getting distribution in theaters, and so they're looking for some help funding to kind of make that happen. And I was really interested in this project because, as some of you know, I had been on a path to reimagine the Pilgrim's Progress as a fantasy audio drama series with swords and dragons and magic weapons and mystical goings on and all that kind of stuff that really wasn't in Bunyan's original work, but that I thought would be cool for geek audiences. And what you may not know that I announced a few months ago is that that's no longer. I'm canceling that series. What I found with that project in particular, as I read and reread The Pilgrim's Progress in the process of adapting it, I just found some doctrinal things, some theological things that I was like, I could shape this and I could change it. I just disagreed with Bunyan's stance theologically on a few issues. He had a tendency to at least come across, if not actually believe in his heart, to come across as preaching a form of legalism, a form of works-based justification, which is something that I wholeheartedly disagree as something that is actually taught from Scripture. So I didn't want to perpetuate that kind of thing by just doing a direct retread of Bunyan's teaching there. But I felt at some point that, I would be creating something that's so different from the original work that it would be hard to justify naming it this, Pilgrim's Progress in any form. So I, put that project down. I moved on to the Storyteller series, which is going to be an adaptation of books of the Bible brought to life dramatically with cinematic sound effects and stuff like that. For more information, you can check out. I put a trailer up a while back, kind of a preview thing at spiritblade.com on our news page, and I hope to move forward with that with the help of patrons, again at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. But circling back to this Pilgrim's Progress project, I'm very interested to see how this turns out and what they decide to do with that material. They do have a trailer on there, but I would say it's less of a trailer and more of a kind of like a series of clips about the making of and what the current state of it maybe is. It doesn't have the kind of drama and flow of a trailer, and it's got a lot of behind the scenes footage as well about the making of. So it's more like, here are some clips of things and our, the vibe we're giving to this classic story. It's clear even from the clips that they are very much rewriting the story. It's an entirely new script. They're keeping the name of at least one or two characters from the original book, but the script is totally different. So I'm wondering how much they're going to have in common and how much they're going to depart from the theology of Bunyan's original works. So I keep wanting to say Paul Bunyan. It's John Bunyan. That's why I've just been saying Bunyan this whole time. It's like, I'm not sure what his first name is. Paul Bunyan's the giant guy with the axe, right? And John Bunyan's the guy that wrote Pilgrim's Progress. Anyway, the animation, what I've seen, I'm kind of hoping it's not representative of the final product, because I don't know, it looks better than something you'd see from VeggieTales, and they really came a long way in that series, but it's not something that I would compare to, say, Pixar. Maybe that's unfair to me to expect that. But I think it could still turn out really well and still be worthy of putting in theaters. But right now there's parts of it that I'm like, the quality seems a little direct to video right now. But what's interesting to me also is the focus of the project. There's a lot. If you go to the website at revelationmedia.com and look at the page for the Pilgrim's Progress at revelationmedia.com, there's a lot of talk about this in terms of it being ministry. I mean, they're also, let's see here. They're also talking it up in a way that I'm like, I don't know if that's the best language to use. Calling it like cutting edge. One of the greatest books ever written is coming to life like never before in CGI animation. The story of the Pilgrim's Progress was written over 300 years ago and has been on an unbelievable journey. Written by John Bunyan while in prison, there it is, John. Smuggled to the underground church during Soviet communism, banned for a time in China, and sold more copies than any book except the Bible. The journey of this remarkable work continues as it comes to an all-new generation in a cutting-edge animated film. And I don't like that wording, because I don't think it's representative of what the product is. If you watch the trailer, I guess if you just in general mean that CGI is cutting edge, I don't know, it's not these days. But I don't think the quality that I'm seeing here could be described as cutting edge. I think there are some wonderful things you could say about this, some great adjectives, complimentary adjectives you could use. I wouldn't use cutting edge. But anyway, they go on to talk about this as a ministry. It's a desire of Revelation Media to translate the film into the world's top 100 languages, reaching the front lines of missions around the globe. Commitments have already been made to fund no less than 20 key languages, and additional fundraising will be sought to bring this film to all corners of the earth. As a Revelation Media co-production, The Pilgrim's Progress will be free to the international missions community to evangelize and encourage the nations. At Revelation Media, we are on a mission to empower every parent, every pastor, and every frontline worker with relevant kingdom-minded media. And then they've got one more paragraph at the bottom here with a big title saying, Communist China is hungry for the Pilgrim's Progress. From the quality of animation to the anointed power of the story, this film has the ability to reach the people of China like never before. In a culture of extreme censorship, the story of the Pilgrim's Progress has ironically been embraced by Chinese officials. The 300-year-old book by John Bunyan is taught in English literature classes throughout China and is accepted reading material in schools and libraries. Imagine the impact this this film will have in the communist country of China. Whether distributed through the underground church or legally in theaters, the classic allegory of the Pilgrim's Progress will continue to point viewers toward Christ the King. And then they've got a little quote there from a man named Pastor Zhao saying, "We need the Pilgrim's Progress now. It will impact China like no other film." So there's a lot on this page that's talking about the work, not merely in it being, entertainment with great themes and providing possible teaching moments. They're really pushing this conceptually as an evangelism tool. And I think perhaps that is actually a good thing for them to be doing on the, at least on their page here, because it just kind of lets you know what this thing is for those who are interested in evangelism in places, in cultures where this will be received positively. To present it as a tool, okay, I think that's great. But I think that American audiences, American mainstream audiences, I don't know if they're going to respond to this well, and so part of me even wonders, do you want to get it into mainstream theaters, or how are they going to market it to an American audience, or just to a mainstream audience? That's what I'm really wondering about. So all the talk here about it being missional, I'm wondering, do they have their ducks in a row as far as the quality of the animation, the quality of the voice acting? I'm not seeing any huge red flags, but in like the trailer. But the script, how it all plays out, how much of the allegory they hang on to and how much they reinvent it, it looks like it's going for very much a children's kind of vibe. So, if they're going to be really simplifying it conceptually, I can imagine a lot of the problematic theology of Bunyan being dropped and left on the wayside anyway, along with some of his good theology being dropped to the wayside because they're just not going for that kind of complexity, and it's going to be more of a children's type of thing. And if the focus is, hey, let's get this in 100 different languages so we can get it all over the place, then it sounds like, a lot of their audience is not mainstream America, but it's maybe some of the poorer countries in the world that aren't as exposed to as much entertainment media, and so they're not going to be as critical and stuff like that. It reminds me a little bit of, wasn't there something a long time ago called like the Jesus movie or something, like back in the 70s, I want to say, that like was really powerful as a ministry tool. It was translated, like redubbed into like a ton of different languages and was like circulated like crazy in all these different countries, but like I as an American had like barely heard of this thing, and then when I saw clips of it, I was like, yee. So I think in its proper place, focus on the right audience, this animated movie could be like hugely impactful. But I have my doubts based on what I've seen on how much of an impact it's going to have on a typical, American moviegoer. All right, so that was a lot of time spent on that. Let's move on to one more thing that I found interesting. Reed Benson, whose username is a good read. I think he changed it recently on the forums to a good read. But anyway, Reed Benson, a longtime member now of the Christian Geek Central community, pointed out a story to me where apparently DC Comics is taking the Batman character into a slightly new direction and retroactively bringing Christianity into his past, specifically his past as a child. The article, called "Batman Reveals His Abandoned Faith in Batman number 53 Exclusive Preview," can be found over at Inverse.com. Inverse.com. The story was published on August 14th, 2018. And I won't share the article with you. You're encouraged to go and check out that yourself. But what was cool on this page is they also included the relevant pages of art from the comic itself. And so we've got in the opening scene here, Bruce Wayne, I don't know the context, haven't been following Batman comics in a long time, but he's having a conversation with a woman, and let's see here, let me scroll down. He says, "Missy, I noticed, forgive me, the way your blouse folds and the chain. Are you wearing a cross?" She says, "Yes, I am. I believe in God. I've attended my church for 20 years. Is that a problem?" He answers, "No, never." She says, "Good." And then he says, "But you've asked me to show here today that Batman could have erred in this case, that his mistakes perhaps led to Freeze being falsely accused. And so I find your cross, your belief, interesting, vital perhaps." She says, "Do you believe in God?" And then there's a bit of a pause. "Bruce." And he answers, "Yes, that's just it. I used to." And he goes on to say, "My father was a Christian. He held hallow the immortal soul, heaven, the Father and the Son, giving your will to your Lord, trusting him with that will. He wanted me to believe too, but he wanted me to come to it on my own. We went to church. He told me all the stories, talked a lot about what we can control, what we can't. Later, after," and they're showing scenes of Bruce kneeling over his parents' bodies now, "I was upset. I put aside believing in a deity, or believing in anything my father thought had saved him. I couldn't really see that anything had saved him. I left Gotham for a while. I searched for something solid to put my faith in." And it's interesting that at that line, "I searched for something solid to put my faith in," the backdrop for that text box is Bruce exercising on gymnast rings. And he's in a pose that is absolutely evoking, I think, the typical images of Jesus on the cross, with his arms stretched out to both sides, his body stretched out in a pointed line horizontally. He says, "I searched for something solid to put my faith in. I asked a great deal of questions. I paid for those answers, but I didn't find anything out there. As far as I went, as far as I went. So I came home, and I waited for something to find me." And then it switches over to him swinging through Gotham as Batman, that presumably indicating that the thing that he was looking for to put faith in was this idea of Batman becoming Batman, basically faith in himself. And this is, I think, a great take on the character. I'm interested because how are they going to portray this? I've always felt that Batman should never go in the direction of becoming like a Christian or coming to faith. I think at most you want to take a character like him to kind of flirt with that and get close to it. But Batman, I think, should be a tragic character. I think he's more interesting as a character when he is tragic. But I think that, like, there's two ways that you can use this background of Christianity as an author. You can use it as part of his background, and like Bruce, you can kind of prop up the idea that, yeah, faith ultimately wasn't practical, it didn't serve any purpose, we ought to believe in ourselves like Batman does, we ought to be like Batman, you know? Or you could write the story in such a way that we kind of recognize that Batman is this jaded, tragic figure, and you could instead prop up his parents as these sort of like examples of virtue and wisdom and what is right, you know, in a similar way to how Jonathan and Martha Kent are propped up as Superman's parents, these sources of wisdom. So, but it's really going to depend on what the author chooses to do with Bruce's parents, because, you know, you can make the argument, well, they had faith in God, but they ended up getting killed, so where was God and all of that, you know, and stuff, which is an understandable question to wrestle with. So they could really go, depending on the author, either way in how they're going to treat Christianity. But I find it very interesting that they specifically say Christian. You know, they yeah, that's as opposed to Catholic or leaning on Catholic imagery and stuff. You know, that's just broad Christianity. Very interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, so if anybody wants to keep track of that and let me know kind of where that evolves, if anywhere, I'd be very interested to know. This writer is also known. Where was it? I can't remember now. But he's also known for writing a very faith-oriented Green Lantern story, which I'm, as a big Green Lantern fan, kind of tempted to check out at some point, but I haven't done that yet. Anyway, so yeah, I just wanted to report on that. I have no idea where the author's last name is King. Tom King? I can't remember if that's his first name, but anyway. Yeah, Tom King. I don't know his background. I know that he has some university training in philosophy, but, you know, who knows where he's coming from personally. So that would be interesting to kind of get to the bottom of and see if we could figure out, you know, peek into his diary and and see maybe where he's coming from. But anyway, wanted to share that with you. And that's all. That's all that I've rounded up for the Christian Geek Radar this time around. Please join us over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Remember that live stream is coming up this Friday right here on youtube.com/christiangeekcentral. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
Oh, jeez!
Oh, jeez!
Mission in Section F.
What the crap? Oh my gosh! Super intimidating. Oh jeez! I didn't know. I didn't know that was gonna bother you so much. It's because I killed your boyfriend, huh? I got your skin too now. Don't feel right. Gotta be reflexible. Oh, jeez! I'm lacking some serious brain functionality.